рада представить нашего спикера. Это Ричард Столлман, легендарный основатель движения свободного ПО, проекта ГНУ и ряда других проектов, которые продвигают свободное программное обеспечение. Если говорить о определениях, коротко скажем, что такое свободное программное обеспечение. Это такие программы, в отношении которых пользователь обладает 4 свободами. Это свобода запускать, изучать, распространять и улучшать программу. Я думаю, Ричард лучше расскажет обо всех этих свободах. Приезд Ричарда – очень важное событие не только для Москвы, но и для всей России. У нас сегодня организован прямой телемост с нашими коллегами из Екатеринбурга и Санкт-Петербурга. Мы вас приветствуем. Они будут задавать вопросы в общем порядке. Для начала я задам вопрос наших читателей, который, собственно, был задан нам через сайт CNews. Российских программистов больше всего волнует такой вопрос: как они смогут зарабатывать на свободном ПО?
First of all, software should be free because that's the only ethical way to distribute software. Free software means the user has the 4 essential freedoms. Freedom 0 is the freedom to run the program as you wish. Freedom 1 is the freedom to study the source code and change it so the program does what you wish. Freedom 2 is the freedom to help your neighbor, which is the freedom to make copies and distribute them when you wish. And freedom 3 is the freedom to contribute to your community, which is the freedom to distribute copies of your modified versions when you wish. Every computer user is entitled to these freedoms, and it's wrong to take them away. So developing proprietary software is simply wrong, and you should never do it unless somebody points a gun at you and says, develop proprietary software or I'll shoot. In that case, obviously, it's forgivable. I wouldn't criticize you for obeying the man with the gun, but that doesn't happen these days. Stalin would have done it, but you're not really in much danger of that now. So at the very least, you should develop no proprietary software. Now, most people are not rich. When I started the GNU project, I certainly wasn't rich. So I knew I'd have to make money somehow. But the point is, there are lots of things in life you can do to make money which are not development of proprietary software. You can even get paid to develop custom software. Developing software for one client to use is most of the paid programming work in the world, and that's perfectly legitimate as long as you respect the freedom of your client. Now, they don't always do that. But any client that accepts, that pays to develop a program and then doesn't get full freedom in using it is a horrible fool. And you shouldn't mistreat people like that. But even if you treat his freedom with respect, he's still going to have to pay to get somebody to write exactly what he wants. That's the only way it will happen. So most of the paid programming work is development of custom software, and that can be done ethically, and it doesn't really change the business. So you could get work like that. And then you could write free software in your spare time, which thousands of volunteers have done. Writing, for those of us for whom programming is natural, it's tremendous fun. So we do it in our spare time because that's the chance to write the program you really want to write, that nobody's going to pay you to write, but that's what fascinates you. So that's one way. But in fact, there are, I believe, thousands of people getting paid to write free software nowadays by various different companies, which have various different motives. There are people who have made small businesses where they get paid by clients to improve certain free software as the clients wish. So the free software does this much, but in order to serve the needs of one client, that client needs this added feature. So the client pays the programmer, probably the author of the program, which is why he's an expert on it, and he can make this improvement better and faster and thus cheaper than anybody else, some people make a business out of this, adding one thing and another thing and another thing and another thing as various clients want to pay for it. And I made a living that way for about 5 years in the 1985 to 90. I was paid to add things to free software I had written, and the things I added I put into the next release. Everyone got to use them as free software. I also was paid to teach classes about various things relating to the software I had written. You may be able to get work developing free software. It's not that rare, but I won't promise it to you. I will not say that finding a free software job is easy, just look and tomorrow you'll have it. What I am saying is you should not contribute to the social problem, which is proprietary software. And you can certainly avoid doing that.
Принимаются ли какие-то шаги для стандартизации свободного ПО?
Yes and no. First of all, there are many standards which we implement to the extent that that's convenient for users. For instance, I participated a little bit in the C standard, and the GNU C compiler implements the C standard, but not in a totally rigorous way, because to implement the C standard rigorously forbids extensions. And I didn't want to obey that. I added various extensions which people find useful. And I also added an option called --pedantic, which makes the compiler give error messages for all the extensions, because that way it officially satisfies the spec. And nobody is expected to use this option, but it's there, so I can honestly say that it satisfies the C standard. And likewise, I was in the POSIX standardization committee, and the various GNU programs implement the specifications of the POSIX standard. But some of them are really stupid. For instance, the standard says that the amount of free disk space has to be listed in half K units. And nobody in the world wanted that. It was bureaucracy gone mad. So I said, we're not going to do this by default. So I said, let's implement this variable, which I called POSIX me harder, which if you define this environment variable, then it would show disk space in half K units. A little after the abortive coup in the Soviet Union, I made an announcement which was a parody of an announcement about a coup. For the most part, there has been no need for standardization efforts that are specifically about free software, but there is one such. It tries to get the various distributions of the GNU/Linux system to be compatible in certain ways. For instance, there's a file system layout that's recommended. And in general, everybody goes along with these proposals because usually there's no reason not to. And it does make the users happier if things are more compatible. But the point that really matters is with free software, the users are in control. So if the users want certain things to be compatible, they get that. And if some users want to make something different, they get that too. Nobody can force anybody to do any particular thing in the code.
А что вы думаете по поводу идеи участия государственных и политических структур в развитии свободного ПО?
They should. In fact, any software that any government agency pays to develop must be free. They should never contribute to the development of proprietary software. Now, sometimes the software needs to be kept secret and unreleased. I suppose, inside weapons, you don't want to release that software at all, which means it's custom software. It's not proprietary software, it's custom software, Well, that's legitimate in some cases. But most of the software that the state pays to develop doesn't have to be secret, and it's not going to be secret. So it should be free software. It should never be proprietary software.
Как вы считаете, какие существуют перспективы по обеспечению информационной безопасности в развивающихся странах, где еще нет рыночных институтов по поддержанию и развитию свободного ПО?
Free software in general is the right way to go for any kind of security goal, whether it's your security on your computer or the state's security on their computer. Security experts say that you shouldn't trust software that's involved in security unless the public has studied the source code. The result is that using proprietary software for that is stupid. The state should never use proprietary software under any circumstances because you can't trust it. The users of proprietary software are under the power of the developer, and the developer mystifies them too, keeps them in the dark. You shouldn't use a program that the community hasn't checked, and neither should the state, for the same reason, which is that neither you nor the state can possibly trust it. Do you think, for instance, that you could trust Microsoft software? You don't know what Microsoft put in there. Microsoft was caught in 1999 having put a backdoor into some server software for the sake of the U.S. National Security Agency. So if you trust Microsoft software, you're a fool, and if the Russian state trusts Microsoft software, then they're fools. And that applies to every user. Only a fool trusts that. But it's not because Microsoft is the only company in the world that would mistreat its users. Many of them do. Many non-free programs have malicious features. This is an abuse that naturally comes out of an unjust power structure. Proprietary software gives the developer power over the users, and this power is a constant temptation to then misuse it by doing nasty things to the users. And the solution is not try to find the one that you can trust with that kind of power over you. The solution is free software where nobody has that kind of power over anybody. With free software, every user has freedom, so nobody has power.
Как продвигаются работы по созданию ядра операционной системы GNU, которая, насколько мы знаем, называется the herd?
Is the name of the GNU kernel, which we started developing in 1990. I'm sad to say it's not making much progress. There are still some people interested in doing some work on it, but nobody is really settling down to do lots of work on it. And it needs substantial changes in order to be something really, in order to possibly become something that's advantageous. The purpose of the GNU project is to develop the GNU operating system, and even though we didn't succeed in every single software project we set out to do, the fact is we have made the GNU system work. It works together with the kernel Linux. The fact is what we need most now is not a different kernel. What we need most is free software to do certain jobs that right now there isn't any free software to do. For instance, we need a free three-dimensional CAD program.
Вкратце, чего не достает, допустим, чтобы СПО, скажем, претендовало на особую роль?
The reason why I started a free software movement is that I was a computer user and a software developer. So software was my field, and I thought about what is the ethical way to do things in my field, and then I said I'm going to do them the ethical way. So this is not a statement about anything else, it's just a statement about software. However, later on, I began to think about other kinds of works of authorship, which are not all textual. And I reached the conclusion eventually that all works that are designed to serve a functional, practical purpose must be free in the same sense, for the same reasons, that their users must be able to control their own lives, and therefore they must have the same four freedoms in using these functional, practical works. These works include programs, recipes for cooking, patterns for sewing things, educational works, reference works, text fonts, which are designed to serve different kinds of purposes. For instance, there are essays of opinion whose purpose is to say, this is what I think. It's not what he thinks, it's what I think. And that raises a different kind of ethical issue. And then there are the works of art whose social contribution is in the impact they make. Different kind of social contribution, because the author is not absolutely critical to the work of art. Whereas for the essay of opinion, the whole point is it says what that person thinks. A statement, a scientific paper, is a statement of testimony. We did this. We saw these results. The fact that certain people put their names on it is absolutely crucial, because they are the witnesses that this is true. But for a work of art, if the author's name were lost, it would still be the same work of art. Because it's not meant to be a statement of fact. It's imagination, which is different. So these are different areas, and I reach different conclusions about them. So it's only within the area of practical functional works, works that you use to do something, that I reach the conclusion that they should be free. But I'm not quick to generalize. I think many people in technical fields rush to generalize any idea as far as it could possibly go. I've seen this many times. They see an answer that applies to one question, and they see that if they throw away certain details of the question, the answer still makes sense. And then they try to generalize the answer merely because it makes sense. But that doesn't mean it's the right answer. It could be the right answer in this case and the wrong answer in this case. So you have to be more careful before you generalize.
Вопрос такой. Не так давно вы оставили пост главного разработчика Emacs. С чем это связано?
There have been 3 other Emacs maintainers in the past for a period of something like 7 years total. So I found other people to take over that post because I'm very busy. And this way, and in fact, I was so busy that I couldn't do justice to the responsibility of being the maintainer of GNU Emacs. So I hope that the 2 people who have that post now will do a better job than I could do. People talk about this not realizing that this isn't the first time. They think of it as a historic moment. But I think it was 1989 when I first found somebody else to be the maintainer of GNU Emacs. And, people didn't consider that a historic moment. And then Gerd Möllmann was the maintainer of Emacs for 4 years, 1997 to 2001, I think. And he implemented really important improvements, such as handling variable width fonts. I wish he had continued, but he didn't want to keep doing the job, so I had to take it over again.
What's the business value of free software?
I do not judge things by their, quote, business value, unquote. I'm not against business as such. That's one part of life. But it's only one part. And things have many kinds of value that has nothing to do with business. But it's a tendency nowadays for many people to disregard or dismiss all the rest of life and act as if life were just business. And I disagree with that attitude fundamentally. And to quote the former French Prime Minister, Jospin, market economy, yes, market society, no. And therefore, I don't judge free software by its business value. I don't judge any software by its business value. I judge it by whether I can use it and be free. And I didn't develop GNU Emacs and GCC. I didn't launch the development of the GNU operating system because of a business consideration. I did it because of something far more important than business, which is how do we win freedom as computer users. But business exists, so you can also judge things by business value. Of course, the words business value are very vague, and I can see at least two interpretations for what that means. First of all, there is what value does free software provide to business? Well, if you're running a business, you should have, and you're using computers, you should have control of your computing, and you should be free to redistribute software when that suits you. In business, just as in a school, just as in your leisure time, in any other area of life, you should have these four freedoms. So business should use free software just as all the rest of us in every other area of life should use free software. And having the four freedoms is very useful to business users. For instance, it means that anytime you are not happy with part of the software, you can pay some programmer, and any programmer you wish, you can choose to pay that programmer to make the change. So this means that you are actually dealing with a free market. If you want to change in a proprietary program, such as Windows or Mac OS or just about any proprietary program, you have to persuade the dictator of that program to change it for you. But if you want to change in a free program, it's like if you want to change in your building. There are lots of people who do that kind of work, and you just have to ask around and see who wants to do the job and see what they say they will charge, and then you can make a deal with whoever you like. So you're much better off with free software. Well, do you have a follow-up question? I think you do.
Wouldn't it be more expensive for me to use free software because I am to have more qualified staff in programming?
Who knows? That depends which free software and which year you're talking about. It happens that there is social inertia in favor of the Windows operating system. So right now, more people know how to use Windows. That is a problem which I hope we will correct. That's not a law of nature. It is not a law of nature that says always more people know how to use Windows than know how to use the GNU plus Linux system. It's simply a contingent fact that's true right now. But we can change that. Now, what effects that has, it's hard to say. It's not that hard to teach people to use GNU plus Linux. After all, it does have nice graphical interfaces nowadays. It's not something you have to become really skilled in order to do. So the people who don't know any computer science, but they just use it, they can learn to use GNU/Linux. It'll be the same people. And lots of places have found that this works. And in terms of system administration, yes, the details are different. But as we make GNU/Linux and other free software more popular, and as schools start to teach it more people will know these things, and then they'll be common. So the point when there's something which is much better, but we see a problem, an obstacle of social inertia, the conclusion we should draw is society needs to make an investment to get across this inertia of this obstacle of social inertia to get to the right place. So that means that each of us, instead of saying, I can't cross this until all the other people do, instead we should say, I see this as a social inertia problem, therefore it's my duty. Every society needs this, therefore I'm going to cross and thus make it easier for the next person. Every person who crosses this path makes the path smoother and easier, so cross it now. And in particular, every school should stop teaching proprietary software and start teaching free software, because if a school teaches the use of proprietary software, it is building up obstacles that block society from doing things the right way.
Скажите, пожалуйста, вот в последнее время у нас в России идут проверки по поводу лицензионности ПО, и даже те фирмы, которые закупают либо скачивают свободное ПО, иногда покупают в бумажном варианте лицензии LGP, LGPL, в том же варианте. Можно ли вот эти вот лицензии в письменном виде, которые продают другие фирмы, считать так юридической поддержкой? Как вы к этому относитесь?
I won't criticize them, but I will criticize the government for requiring that stupid, ridiculous activity. I want to say the law that was used to prosecute Mr. Ponosov, that law is an injustice. It's not just that, not merely that applying it to him was an injustice, although that's obviously true, but that law is fundamentally wrong, because people must be free to share copies of any published work. Sharing copies is part of social cooperation that makes a society. Forbidding that is unjust. And that law must be abolished. To the extent that the law is silly, it's because the law is like a program. But it's not totally like a program. It is interpreted by human beings, after all, who can't help applying a basic level of common sense all the time, which is beyond what computer programs are capable of. So it's not exactly the same. And I should also point out that hacking and programming are not synonymous. Hacking is playful cleverness. Now, some people write programs with playful cleverness, and other people write programs just as a job, and I'm sorry for those people because they're not having fun, but it happens. So the point is, not everybody writing software is doing so in the spirit of hacking. And not everybody working on laws is doing so in the spirit of hacking either. Of course, laws have an importance. They affect people. And so it's a very serious thing to do. Software also affects people, and thus it is also a serious thing to do. But one of the things about being a hacker is that you can enjoy playful cleverness and be serious at the same time. So, for instance, when I decided to develop a free software operating system so that computer users could have freedom, that is as serious an activity as can be imagined. It's a campaign for everybody's freedom. But I could still pick a funny name for the system because it's always fun to have fun. And no matter how serious a thing you're doing, you can have fun at the same time.
Чего не хватает на российском рынке программного обеспечения, чтобы они стали популярными?
What is the Russian market of software lacking to make the free software be widely used?
I don't think the word market is appropriate there, because market assumes you're talking about things being bought and sold. And one of the things about free software is that if we put aside silly laws that make people buy silly things, it doesn't have to be bought and sold. Copies can be bought and sold, but that's not the only way. So it's a mistake to equate computer and software users with a market. Sometimes they act like a market and sometimes they don't. And therefore, I would rather speak of computer use in Russia, or users in Russia, software users in Russia, and not use the term market, which imposes a presupposition I think is not appropriate. So what is needed for the success of free software in Russia? Well, it's the same thing as anywhere else, basically. People need to decide to switch, and people need to help other people switch. Schools should stop teaching proprietary software and start teaching free software. Schools need to teach people to be good citizens of a strong, independent, cooperating, and free society. And that means, when you look at the specific area of computers, that means teaching them to be free software users. Because teaching them to use proprietary software is implanting dependency. And that's the opposite of what schools should do. So the government has a role to play as well, since the government operates many schools. And those schools should all switch to free software, as has happened in parts of Spain and is happening in parts of India. Those are things that should be done. But we also need to spread the understanding of these ideas of freedom, so that people can understand that there's more at stake here than just what is convenient. The kind of person who asks only, where do I want to go today, is easily manipulated by others in the long term. But the person who thinks, what kind of life do I want to live in 5 years from now, is harder to manipulate.
Когда свободное программное обеспечение станет мейнстримом?
So, what is your point of view? When will the free software become a mainstream?
Well,
when it will not
these are two different. I see no connection between the introduction and the question, but I'll talk about both of them. It's true that free software is very often a replacement for a proprietary program. And this makes sense as long as proprietary software is ahead of us. It's easier for us to catch up, and that's exactly what we should do, because if people are using a proprietary program, that is a social problem. And if we want to eliminate the social problem, providing those users with a replacement that they can switch to easily is exactly the best thing we can possibly do, with occasional exceptions if we see a way to make a certain thing better. If the users, obviously, if we have an idea to do it differently and the users are happy switching to that, good. But the point is, there's a very good reason to focus our effort on making free replacements for the programs that already have many users trapped. In 1983, when I announced the plan to develop GNU, there was very little free software. Almost all software was proprietary, so we had a lot of catching up to do. And developing a free replacement for Unix, which is what GNU is, was a good idea. However, there are free programs that were developed that are not replacements for anything else. I can think right now of Perl and Python, and I think there's also Ruby. I don't know any of those, but those were all developed for the first time as free software.
Почему, допустим, сообщество, которое занимается свободным ПО, оно не акцентирует внимание на очень важном вопросе ввода информации?
Oh, well, I don't think that's true. As far as I know, a lot of free software projects do pay attention, but remember, free software packages are, each free software package is developed by a different group of people. and these groups do different things. They you know, some do a better job and some do a worse job. Some pay a lot of attention to human interface issues, and others don't really understand the issue. But the thing is, if there is a free program that is useful but doesn't have a very good human interface, other people, anybody who wants to, can modify that program to have a better human interface and release that version and say to people, do you think this version is better? So that's the ultimate recourse which exists with free software.
Сначала говорили, что сам проект не приняли всерьез, поэтому удалось вырваться.
So first of all, you mentioned that the project was not taken seriously at first, at the very beginning.
Well, it depends by whom. Some people heard about it and thought this is exciting and joined. But most people thought the idea was silly. And then there were other people who sympathized with the idea, but they thought that the project of writing a Unix-like operating system starting from zero was so big that it was impossible. So they said, oh, it would be nice, but I give up without even trying.
Впоследствии ощущали на себе противодавление каких-то фирм, производящих проприетарный софт, или государства даже, может быть?
When I announced the plan to develop GNU, I announced it in order to ask other people to join in. So it was not a one-man project. In fact, in January 1984, when I started, another person also started working on another piece of the system. So at the very beginning of actually doing work, there were two of us.
Слово нашим коллегам из Петербурга.
Меня зовут Павел Фролов. Я директор Linux-центра. И сегодня мы решили проявить уважение к позиции Ричарда Столлмана. Он вчера написал нам, что мне нравится наше название. И мы решили переименовать Linux-центр в GNU Linux-центр. Это официальное заявление, и с сегодняшнего дня мы будем называться GNU Linux-центр.
They've decided to rename the Linux Center into
Thank
GNU
you.
Linux Center.
Thank you very much.
And my question is about OpenIDA 2. First of all, I want to know your opinion about what is the place of the Linux group in the modern world. I'll explain. Previously, most of the members of such groups were hackers. They shared code, they hack some things and so on. But nowadays, more and more general users become the members of such groups, and more general users use GNU software. So, what do you mean? What do you think of the place of the GNU Linux groups in this world?
I think that there are two jobs that a GNU plus Linux user group should do, and one is invite people and teach people to use the GNU plus Linux system, and the other is to teach the ideas of free software so people will understand why it's important to use a free system such as, for instance, GNU/Linux. And so those are just as important now as they were 10 years ago. There's no reason to think that this has ceased to be needed.
And the second question is, FSF previously released the GNU FDL license, and with the update of the GPL, there were no update of the FDL. And in the end, you have stated that you wish to have your records under the Creative Commons license. So is this official position of the
Sorry,
FSF?
there is no such thing. There is no such thing as... Please, these are two separate questions, and there's a misunderstanding. There is no such thing as the Creative Commons license. Creative Commons releases several licenses which are very different in what they do. Now, I've started using one particular Creative Commons license, that is the no derivs license, for some of my statements of opinions. I think it's appropriate for statements of opinion to permit sharing copies but not permit modification. However, and that obviously is not that's not a free license. It's not acceptable for documentation or manuals because people have to be free to change the technical documentation. So we're going to continue using the GNU Free Documentation License. Now, I'm not sure whether we're going to go ahead with the plans in the drafts that we released about 2 years ago now, and it remains to be thought about. I can't hear what he is saying. It's partly because of distortion in the line, and together with speaking quickly. I'm a bit hard of hearing. If you could say that slowly, then I might be able to understand.
What's your opinion about integration of some .NET components into modern free desktops like GNOME?
Sorry, document what?
.NET.
Integration .NET components into the GNOME desktop.
I think it is okay that are written using mono. However, I think it would be potentially dangerous to depend on them. And that seems to be the position of GNOME as well. And the reason is that it would be dangerous is Microsoft has already said that it plans to use patents to try to attack us. And we know that Microsoft has patents on some of the techniques used in .NET. And the standard that they got adopted for C# is just a part of that. And when they made that a standard, they promised they wouldn't sue implementers. But that promise only applies to the official C# standard and does not apply to the rest. So it's inviting a possible attack. But if it's used for some programs that are nice but not absolutely essential, we might as well use them as long as Microsoft isn't going around attacking us for using them.
What developer can get from it, how it can better protect my code from license violations?
Okay, first of all, there's a bit of a confusion in the question. The GPL is designed to protect the freedom of all users. Now, the way it does this is through legal requirements based on copyright law. So the idea is that if somebody tries to deny freedom to certain users, that this is a violation of the license, which means that we can stop him by going to court. That's true for all versions of the GPL. What's changed in GPL version 3 is a lot of details. So I could list a few of the most important improvements in GPL version 3. One is it's designed to be more internationally uniform. So with GPL version 2, we designed it based on US law. For GPL version 3, we talked to lawyers from many countries, and we redesigned some things. We decided to avoid certain words that have different meanings in the laws of different countries, and thus reduce the variation in the results from country to country. Now, we can't totally eliminate it because the GPL is based on copyright law, and if to some extent, when copyright law varies, those effects will affect everybody. But at least we have avoided the variations that can be avoided. Another benefit is GPL version 3 is compatible with certain other free software licenses that are incompatible with GPL version 2. For instance, the Apache license is incompatible with GPL version 2, but it is compatible with GPL version 3. So that means that you can actually put together code under GPL3 with code under the Apache license and merge them together. Another advantage is that GPL version 3 says it's okay to distribute physical copies of the binaries and make the source code available on the net. In 1991, I felt that that would be bad for the users because many users in some parts of the world, all the users, only had dial-up connections. And to tell them, okay, here's the binary and the source you can download, if it's a lot of source, that's like telling them they can't get it. But nowadays, broadband is found all over the world. You can get the source that way. So that's another improvement. Another improvement is if you violate the license but unintentionally, and then you see your mistake and you correct it. With GPL version 2, if, for instance, you distribute binaries without source code for a while, well, you have lost your right to distribute all that software, and the only way to get it back is to ask all the copyright holders, and there could be lots of those, to give you back your rights. But with GPL version 3, if you correct your mistake, and then 60 days go by, and copyright holders have not complained to you, then you get your rights back. So the only ones you have to ask to forgive you are the ones who have complained before 60 days after you corrected the mistake. And that will probably only be a few of them. Especially if they see it was an innocent mistake, you know. One of them sees it and tells you, hey, you're not doing this right, so you fix it. Well, he's not going to go around telling everybody else you made a mistake unless he hates you, and he sees you're fixing it. He'll probably forgive you, and meanwhile, all the rest you're okay with because they didn't complain. You fixed it, 60 days go by, they didn't complain, so you're okay. This is much better for anybody who is distributing a large collection of software, because mistakes do happen. Now, another benefit is that the GPL version 3 deals with two newer ways of trying to attack the user's freedom. One of them is TiVoization. That is the practice of building the machine so that it checksums the program, and if the program has been modified, then the machine shuts down. GPL version 3 says that the vendor of the machine has to provide you on request with the installation information that enables you to install your modified version and make the machine accept it. Now, if the code is in ROM, well, that's okay. They can't change it and you can't change it, so that's okay. But if they have the ability to change it, if they have the ability to tell the machine to accept the modified version, they have to tell you how to do that, so you can change the software in your machine. The other attack is the attack in the Novell-Microsoft Pact. Microsoft used its patents to make Novell pay effectively per copy, and they did this in a way that cleverly bypasses the protections in GPL version 2. So we added additional protections to block pacts like that. So these are the most important of the changes in GPL version 3, at least that I can remember now. If you want a full explanation of all the changes, look at gplv3.fsf.org. There you can find the rationale document, which explains each change. Even tiny little wording changes get an explanation. And there are big articles on the major changes. So whichever change you are interested in, you can find information about it there.
Мы приветствуем вас от лица теперь уже компании GNU Linux Center.
So we represent the company GNU Linux Center.
И разработчиков и пользователей свободного программного обеспечения города Екатеринбурга.
И скажите, пожалуйста, в чем вы видите идеальное сосуществование проприетарного программного обеспечения и свободного? И может ли проприетарное вчера стать свободным завтра? И какие для этого предпосылки?
First of all, of course, free software can coexist with proprietary software. It does. If something happens, you know it's possible. But it's not a good state of affairs to coexist with proprietary software, because as long as people are using proprietary software, that means their freedom is denied to them. So the goal is to eliminate the social problem, which is proprietary software. Whether we will ever fully succeed in this, I don't know. But we can surely succeed a lot more than we have succeeded so far. Nowadays, most computer users use proprietary software, so most of them are the victims of an injustice. Maybe we'll never succeed in completely eliminating proprietary software, but we can surely get the amount much less, and the amount of use of it much less, and thus there will be less injustice. And those of us who really want to live in freedom, we need to escape from proprietary software. I won't let any non-free software be installed on this computer because I want my freedom. And if you want your freedom, you should do the same thing. Reject proprietary software and kick it out of your life. Now, what was the second half of his question? I'm so sleepy.
All right. The second question was the following: whether proprietary software can become free software in the future.
Well, any given proprietary program can be turned into free software by whoever has control over it. Now, sometimes this is complicated because we see sometimes there is a proprietary software product which actually contains pieces that are under the control of different developers. And thus, no one of them can actually liberate it. So that makes things more difficult. But on the other hand, if the main developer can't liberate certain parts, at least it can liberate most of the program, and then we can work on replacing the other parts. That's what happened with Sun's Java platform. Sun liberated most of it, but there were parts of it that were under some other ruler's control, and Sun couldn't liberate them. So we're working on replacing them. And so we hope there will be a complete free Java platform one of these days.
Когда вы планируете выпустить официальный перевод лицензии GPL на русский язык? И что вы собираетесь предпринимать, чтобы эта лицензия имела юридическую силу в России?
First of all, there are websites that will download they'll download programs to your machine, and you don't know that because it's happening inside your browser. Well, that software may be free or not, and so it may be ethical or not. But either way, I want control of the copy on my machine. So if the program it sends to your browser is non-free, that's no good. That's just as bad as installing non-free software in your machine in any other way. If it's free, then it's basically okay, but I want to be able to control which version of that program I run. So I want control over its installation. I don't want it to just come in with a web page all the time. I want to be able to say, I want that version. All right, use that. I choose that version. Use that when I talk to that website. The other thing that they're talking about is totally different, and that is you send data to a site, and it does computations and sends you back some sort of output. in that case, you don't have a copy of the program. It may be custom software, or it may be proprietary software, or it may be free software, or it may be some of all of them, who knows? Well, if it's proprietary software, that means the operator of the site doesn't have control over his computing, and that's bad, obviously. If it is custom software, well, custom software is normally okay, and if it's free software, well, it's okay that he installs free software. I'm glad he's using some. But when you use the site to do your computing with your data, you are giving up control of your computing. So you shouldn't use somebody else's server to do that. So the real question is, what is the server doing? Because servers do lots of different things. Technically, they may be using the same method, but that doesn't mean that these are similar cases ethically. So consider, for instance, the Google search engine. Well, that's a case where you're asking for something to be done on somebody else's server. But what is it that you're asking to be done? It's looking through his data. And I guess that's okay. It's not your computation that you do on your data. It's primarily looking at Google's data. And another thing people do is e-commerce. You're buying something from somebody. And what you're doing with the site is working out, arranging the transaction. Okay, if you trust that company with your credit card number, it's no worse to do it this way than to do it by putting it on, having them roll the thing across a piece of paper. Either way, they get your credit card number, and of course, it's a serious crime if they leak your credit card number, so you can generally trust them, and so you can do that if you don't mind the fact that it's not anonymous. I usually won't buy things with credit cards. I want to pay with cash, because if I pay with cash, nobody has a record of the fact that I was there or what I bought. But that's a different issue.
And then you don't use internet at all?
Well, not from this computer. I will from other computers. But that's I'm not ethically against it. That's a personal penance for unrelated reasons. It has nothing to do with these issues. So the point is that there are various things you can do with a server, and some of them, as I see it, don't pose a problem of control of your computing, because what you're doing isn't your computing. And now consider Wikipedia. If you participate in Wikipedia and you edit pages, well, you don't have control over the software on their server, but it's not your computing. You are volunteering to help Wikipedia's computing. So Wikipedia is what should have control, and it does. So it's okay. So there are various cases that are okay, but here's a case which is not okay. Google Docs, which is essentially things like a spreadsheet and a word processor, but it doesn't run on your computer. So you put your documents on somebody's server, and they have control of your computing, and you've trusted all your data to them. That's a mistake. You should do your word processing on your computer with your copy of a program that is of a free program, so that it's under your control.
Вопрос такой, философский. Как мы знаем из Библии, апостолы довольно быстро отреклись от Иисуса, когда его не стало. Вы уверены в своих последователях?
First of all, we don't know that what it says in the Bible actually happened. We can be sure that some of it didn't happen. Miracles don't happen. Whether the other things that were not miraculous happened or not, it's hard to say, because that was not a contemporary document. The Gospels were written many decades after the events that they claim to describe, and they don't even agree with each other. So we don't know if that really happened, and if it did happen, we don't know why. There was an interesting book called The Passover Plot, which proposed the theory that Jesus asked Judas to betray him because he had a plan that by being crucified just before the time that people would be taken down, he wouldn't be on the cross long enough to die from it, but that this went wrong because of the Roman soldier that stabbed him. So, who knows? I don't go in for intrigue like that. And so I wouldn't arrange for somebody to pretend to betray the movement. And I can't foretell the future. And I don't claim to be a messiah. I only claim to be somebody who campaigns for human rights.
Коллеги, давайте поблагодарим Ричарда за ответы на вопросы.
Читайте в новом номере журнала CNews. Нелегальное ПО. Как не оказаться в наручниках. Самые яркие русские ИТ-компании за рубежом. Телефония. Что стоит и чего не стоит переводить на IP. Журнал CNews. Все о высоких технологиях в бизнесе.